So the Davos conference has become shorthand for the contempt that people have for the global elite, and for good reason. It's this swanky, week-long gathering of all the worst elites, not just in the West, but the Gulf state tyrants and the oil mavens and the bankers and financiers in Asia all get together and sort of plan and gather with one another and just kind of reinforce each other's elite status. But there's a lot of policies that come out of Davos as well. And one of the people present at Davos this week, in fact, is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who somehow was able to leave Ukraine and his daily supervision of this war as the supreme general on the front line in fatigues, in that costume that he wears, supervising the war. He was able to go to Davos, thankfully. And for the first time, and it's kind of amazing, he did not go there to ask for more money. As we speak, President Biden is meeting with congressional leaders in the White House. The current status is that President Biden asked for $110 billion in emergency funding. $14 billion for Israel, $60 billion for Ukraine, and then the rest, another $40 billion or so for various programs. But $60 billion is what they really want, which is for Ukraine, to keep that war funded. Obviously, everyone's going to vote for the $14 billion for Israel. Nobody questions money going to Israel, but $60 billion in Ukraine, there's a significant chunk of the Republican caucus opposed to that and questioning that. And if it gets to the floor, it will definitely pass by a significant majority because there's more than enough Democrats. In fact, every Democrat will vote yes. There'll be more than enough pro-war hawks in the Republican Party to join with the Democrats and form a majority. Right now, the position of Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the House, is he won't bring that bill to the floor unless there are very serious and substantive concessions made by the White House to give the Republicans the kind of border security that they have long been asking for. Things like walls and very real efforts to keep people out. And obviously, Joe Biden has a major problem because if he offers serious concessions to toughen up the border and prevent people from getting in and even taking people who have recently arrived and deporting them, he's going to have a lot of problems with major constituencies in his party who have been told for 4 years that these kinds of border policies that Donald Trump has wanted are fascist and are white nationalist and are racist and designed to keep brown people out of our country. But if he doesn't agree to these things, not only is he going to have the political vulnerability of an insecure border, but he's also going to be impeded from what he really wants, which is $60 billion for Ukraine to keep this war going. Now, Zelensky is appearing at this Davos conference knowing that Western capitals have grown tired of the Ukraine war, and especially of transferring tens of billions of dollars there for a war that only gets worse for Ukraine. They can't win. They have a massive artillery shortage. They simply don't have enough people to fight any longer. They're dragging 50-year-old disabled and obese people off buses and sending them against their will to the front line. They expanded recently the list of people who can be conscripted to include all kinds of horrible, crippling diseases and congenital defects. They're just grabbing anyone they can and just throwing them into the front line as cannon fodder because they don't have enough people to fight and they never will. The Russians have held these defensive positions for more than a year now. They occupy and control 20% of Ukraine. And if anything is moving, it's the Russians expanding and taking over more cities. There's no way for Ukraine to do anything but make a real peace deal with Russia. That could have been done 2 years ago. But that Biden and Boris Johnson said no to, and therefore this war continued. Hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people at least have died since then on both sides. And Ukraine is destroyed. We're going to come in, and who do you think is going to pay for its reconstruction? The United States will. It'll go to BlackRock and JP Morgan and all these vultures that are just waiting. A lot of them are at Davos to, quote, do business with Kiev. Imagine how much money is going to flood Kiev with this reconstruction. But here is the, quote unquote, peace deal that Zelensky is now calling for. There is the New York Times headline. Zelensky calls for peace, not more weapons, in Davos. Quote, in a speech in Switzerland, the Ukrainian president asked for more sanctions on Moscow, but he did not appeal for weaponry for new offenses. Mr. Zelensky, dressed in olive green pants and a black crewneck sweater, somehow he has time to leave the battle-heavy front lines where he usually is President manning the war. He's able to go to Davos, but he can't put on a suit because he has to wear that war costume that the West has fallen in love with. The New York Times describes it as olive green pants and a black crew neck sweater. So he was well dressed and nice war chic for Davos. He was greeted with applause when he walked on stage in a room packed with hundreds of people at the forum, a high-profile gathering of business and financial elites. In his speech, he promised a Ukrainian peace plan and called for stiffer sanctions on Russia. But in contrast with his comments to the forum last year, Mr. Zelensky made no direct appeals for weaponry for new offensives on the battlefield. Quote, "We need you in Ukraine to build, to reconstruct, to restore our lives," he told the audience of investors. "Each of you can even be more successful with Ukraine." Obviously what they want to do, the massive amount of money that has flown into Kiev, nobody knows where that money has gone, as we've shown you many times, is starting to dry up. And now he wants a new flow of cash from the West, which is the money that will go to rebuilding Ukraine. And that will be a whole new source of money that will come from the American public into the coffers of Kiev. Imagine the buildings they're going to build and the buildings they're going to restore and who's going to finance that and how much money will be made. Quote, Mr. Zelensky's highlighted his country's plan to end the war, an initiative called the Peace Formula, which has gained the backing of dozens of countries. But those countries do not include Russia, and Moscow has rejected its terms. Now, what is this peace plan that so many people are on board with, but that Russia said, and you see there in the New York Times trying to apply it unreasonably, won't accept? What is this peace plan that Zelensky is offering? Here's what it is. The plan calls for, number one, a full Russian withdrawal from all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea. So Russia has spent the last 2 years pouring enormous amounts of money into this war, losing at least 100,000 Russians, probably a lot more, in order to take all of this territory that it says are filled with ethnic Russians, Russian-speaking people in Ukraine who don't want to be under the central government of Kiev, but who want to be part of Russia or who at least want to be independent. They've been fighting a war of independence for 8 years. They've had Crimea since 2014. And so Zelensky's peace plan is they're just going to give that all back. They're going to leave Ukraine. They're going to just give all back the territory that they've taken, that they've, with so much of their citizens' blood, have been able to regain as a buffer against the West. And they're going to give back Crimea, which they've had since 2014 and which they have said is of existential importance to their security. But they're not only going to do that under this plan, they're also going to agree to pay for reparations, so they're going to pay Ukraine, and they're going to agree to submit to prosecution of war crimes. So Putin's going to give back all the land that he has taken. He's then going to transfer all the Russian treasury to Ukraine, and he's going to say, okay, now I'm going to The Hague to be tried for war crimes. This is such a delusional offer. The kind of thing that you would offer if you have routed the Russians and captured all of their troops and crippled their economy and destroyed the country, and now you're forcing unconditional surrender on them. Why would anybody describe this as a peace plan? This is a demand by the losing party that the winning party unconditionally surrender. Oh, you think Putin rejected this plan? The only thing that Ukraine could possibly negotiate for is for the Russians to keep some portion of eastern Ukraine and give those provinces some sort of independent or autonomous status, or at least a referendum to allow the citizens of those provinces to decide, do they want to be part of Russia? Do they want to be part of Kiev? Do they want to be part of, or they want to be independent, similar to the referendum that was given to the people of Kosovo when it was time to justify independence of Kosovo and splitting Kosovo from Serbia, as was done in the late 1990s after the U.S. bombardment of Serbia. And that would be the model. And then you would actually have to have the Ukrainians agree they're not going to go into NATO, they're going to be a neutral country, to give Russia the security that it needs from the West, that the West won't keep expanding up to their border. But to offer a peace plan like this, it would be like if Hamas tomorrow says, okay, we have a peace plan for you, Israel. You're going to withdraw all your troops from Gazan territory. Then you're going to transfer $100 billion from Israel to Gaza to allow us to rebuild everything that you've destroyed. And Netanyahu is going to be hanged in the public square along with his top 12 officials that we select. It would be as if Gaza offered that peace plan and somebody would say, well, you're obviously, that maybe is what should happen, but you're obviously in no position to offer that. You're not winning this war. You don't have an army. You don't have a military. You're getting crushed. That is what this is like. It is. Remember, we showed you before this article from Time Magazine back in November where top Zelensky officials ran to Time Magazine to warn the West that Zelensky was completely delusional. And that here it is, everybody in Kiev understands that the war is basically over except for Zelensky. That's the Time Magazine article from November 1st. Nobody believes in our victory like I do. Inside, Vladimir Zelensky struggled to keep Ukraine in the fight. And you see the text, Zelensky's stubbornness. Some of his aides say has hurt their team's efforts to come up with a new strategy, a new message. As they have debated the future of the war, one issue has remained taboo. The possibility of negotiating a peace deal. One issue has remained taboo, the possibility of negotiating a peace deal with the Russians. Despite the recent setbacks on the battlefield, Zelensky does not intend to give up fighting or to sue for any kind of peace. On the contrary, his belief in Ukraine's ultimate victory over Russia has hardened into a form that worries some of his advisors. It is immovable, verging on the messianic. Quote, he deludes himself. One of his closest aides tells me in frustration, we're out of options. We're not winning, but try telling him that. So this is what we have here. We have, on the one hand, a leader of a country who is the head of this country, whose war we're financing, who is delusional, according to his own aides and officials. He's not living in reality. And he shows up at Davos with a peace plan that is a complete joke. And the New York Times says a lot of people are on board with this, like the West, but Moscow isn't ready to accept this deal. As though this is any sort of a serious deal, as though this is anything remotely resembling what would actually have to happen for this war to end. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.